Superior tactician Valexis stared at the holographic display, his 4 primary eyes narrowing at the anomalous readings. The vessel had appeared without warning at the edge of Zaxri space, defying their most advanced detection systems. Its sudden emergence sent ripples of concern through the bridge crew of the Dominance Eternal. "Analysis," he commanded, his secondary eyes fixed on the subordinate manning the sensor array. "Unknown configuration. Superior tactician. Initial scans suggest primitive technology. Fusion-based propulsion, metallic hull composition, minimal energy signatures." The analyst's voice carried a note of confusion. But something isn't right about these readings. Valexis chittered thoughtfully. In his 3 centuries of service to the Zaxri Defense Fleet, he'd overseen first contact with 17 species. Each encounter had followed the same pattern. Primitive vessels stumbling into their space, followed by swift subjugation and integration into the hegemony. This should be no different. But something about this vessel made his carapace itch. "Magnification," he ordered. The hologram zoomed in, revealing more detail of the intruder. Its hull bore markings in an unknown script. "UN Heavy Cruiser Wellington." Below that, barely visible. "Through the darkness, we bring light." Inside the Wellington's bridge, Captain Jessica Miller sat with perfect posture in her command chair, a slight smile playing at the corners of her mouth. The bridge was silent except for the soft hum of equipment and the occasional status update from her crew. "They're scanning us again, Captain," Lieutenant James Cooper reported from his station. "Want me to keep feeding them the Presset readings?" Miller nodded, her blue eyes fixed on the tactical display showing the approaching Zaxri vessels. "Maintain the deception protocol. Let them see exactly what intelligence said they'd expect to see." She turned to her tactical officer. "Commander Torres, status of our primitive weapons systems." Amanda Torres's fingers danced across her console, checking the sophisticated systems hidden beneath layers of quantum camouflage. "All systems nominal, Captain. The new stealth matrices are performing perfectly. As far as they can tell, we're running on fusion drives from the 2100s. Miller allowed herself a moment of pride. The Wellington represented decades of human innovation in military deception. Every inch of the ship was designed to appear less advanced than it was, hiding cutting-edge technology behind facades of primitive systems. The Zaxri would see exactly what humanity wanted them to see. Until it was too late. "Their fleet is moving to standard containment formation," Torres reported, highlighting the alien vessel's movements on the main screen. "Looks like they're following their usual first contact protocols. Just as the captured data suggested they would," Miller mused. "Status of the quantum core." Purring like a kitten, Chief Engineer Derek Sullivan's voice came through the comm. "Ready to show these folks what real power looks like when you give the word." Miller checked the time. The Wellington had to maintain this charade for exactly 7 more minutes, long enough for the Zaxri to commit to their standard subjugation approach, but not so long that they might notice the inconsistencies in their sensor readings. On the Dominance Eternal, Valexis was becoming increasingly certain that something was wrong. The vessel's energy signatures didn't match its apparent level of technology. The hull composition readings kept shifting slightly. As if, "Superior tactician." The sensor operator's voice rose in alarm. "The vessel, it's moving." Valexis watched in disbelief as the supposedly primitive ship executed a perfect pivot, bringing its broadside to bear on his fleet with a level of maneuverability that should have been impossible for its size and configuration. "By the first egg," he whispered, his secondary eyes widening in shock. "What are we dealing with?" Captain Miller's smile widened as the final seconds ticked down. "Ladies and gentlemen," she announced to her crew, "let's show the Zaxri hegemony why humanity doesn't do subjugation." Lieutenant Cooper, drop the masking fields. Commander Torres, power up all weapons systems. Let's give them a proper human welcome. The Wellington's hull began to shimmer as its true nature was revealed, and the real first contact between humanity and the Zaxri hegemony was about to begin. Lieutenant James Cooper had spent 5 years training for this moment. His electronic warfare station aboard the Wellington hummed with activity as he orchestrated what he privately called his symphony of lies. Each alien scan was met with a carefully crafted response, a masterwork of deception years in the making. "They're trying to penetrate the aft section again," he reported, fingers dancing across holographic controls. "Feeding them the damaged reactor signature now." Captain Miller nodded, watching the tactical display as 6 Zaxri vessels adjusted their position, clearly responding to the false data. "How are they taking the bait?" "Hook, line, and sinker, Captain." Cooper grinned as he monitored the incoming scan patterns. "Their algorithms are practically tripping over themselves trying to make sense of our inconsistent power fluctuations." On the Dominance Eternal, Superior Tactician Valexis fought mounting frustration as another scan returned impossible results. Where the previous sweep had shown a primitive fusion reactor operating at minimal capacity, now their sensors detected radiation patterns consistent with a containment breach. "This cannot be correct," he growled, all 4 eyes fixed on the constantly shifting readings. No vessel could remain operational with these power fluctuations. "Run a full spectral analysis." His sensor officer's appendages trembled slightly as she input the commands. "Superior Tactician, the results. They make no sense. Each scan shows a different configuration. It's as if the vessel is constantly rebuilding itself." Inside the Wellington's Combat Information Center, deep within the heavily shielded core of the ship, senior analyst Maria Reynolds watched the alien scan patterns with professional satisfaction. The ship's quantum AI systems were learning from each probe, building an increasingly detailed profile of Zaxri scanning technology. "Their primary sensors operate on a truncated quantum wave function," she noted, sending her findings to the bridge. "Exactly as our preliminary intelligence suggested. They literally cannot conceive of our hull's phased quantum state." Back on the bridge, Commander Torres's tactical display suddenly lit up with new information. "Captain, they're spinning up their weapons systems. Looks like our reactor breach has them worried." "Right on schedule," Miller replied. "Mr. Cooper, time to show them something really interesting. Initialize the Phantom Fleet protocol." Cooper's hands flew across his console as he activated one of the Wellington's most sophisticated deception systems. The surrounding space seemed to flicker as quantum ghost images appeared briefly on the Zaxri sensors. Shadows of ships that weren't there, power signatures that appeared and vanished, and communication bursts that seemed to come from multiple vectors. Valex's command center erupted in chaos as new contacts appeared on their screens. Multiple vessels detected. His tactical officer shouted, "No, they're gone. Wait, new signatures appearing portside." "Impossible," Valexis hissed. "Their sensor technology is primitive. They cannot be generating these signatures." He turned to his communication officer. "Send the standard surrender demand. Now." The message burst forth from the Dominance Eternal in all known contact protocols. The Wellington's communication officer, Sarah Foster, looked up from her station with an amused expression. "They're broadcasting their surrender demand, Captain. Want me to show them how primitive our communication systems are?" Miller straightened in her chair. "Execute Phase 2 of the contact protocol, Lieutenant Cooper. Let's see how they handle some real quantum mechanics." Cooper initiated the Wellington's true sensor suite, its quantum scanning arrays piercing through the Zaxri ship's defenses like they weren't there. Within seconds, the human vessel had mapped every system, every weapon, and every weakness in the alien fleet. "Full spectrum analysis complete," he announced. "Their most advanced quantum-locked systems are about 30 years behind our baseline tech. Their shields have no defense against parallel phase attacks, and their weapons systems rely entirely on conventional physics." Miller allowed herself a small smile. "Send them our response, Ms. Foster. All frequencies, all languages we've decoded from their transmissions. Let's show them what a primitive species can do." The message that burst from the Wellington was a masterpiece of technological demonstration. It cut through every Zaxri defense, appeared simultaneously on every screen in their fleet, and was delivered in perfect high Zaxri. a language the aliens believed impossible for outsiders to comprehend. "Attention, Zaxri vessels," Miller's voice echoed through their ships. "Perhaps we should discuss the definition of primitive." Superior Tactician Valixis had run out of patience. The human vessel's mocking response still echoed through his command center, and his crew's confusion was rapidly turning to fear. There was only one way to reassert control over this situation. "Target their propulsion systems," he commanded. A measured response. "Show them the consequences of their insolence." The Dominance Eternal's main weapon array charged with a building line, plasma condensers forming a miniature sun at its focal point. The energy burst forth, a brilliant azure beam that should have crippled any vessel of the Wellington's apparent technological level. Commander Amanda Torres watched the incoming plasma strike on her tactical display with professional interest. Plasma weapon discharge, standard subjugation protocol. Temperature and density exactly as intelligence predicted. She glanced at Captain Miller. "Permission to demonstrate our actual maneuverability." Miller's eyes gleamed. "Show them what the Wellington can really do, Commander." Torres's fingers flew across her console, activating systems that had remained dormant until now. Deep within the Wellington's hull, quantum inertial dampeners spooled up, and the revolutionary Hawking drive emerged from its dormant state. The massive human warship moved. On the Dominance Eternal's bridge, Valix's primary eyes widened in shock as the supposedly primitive vessel simply ceased to be where it had been. The plasma burst passed through empty space, and for a fraction of a second, he thought they had somehow destroyed the vessel entirely. Then his tactical officer screamed. The Wellington had reappeared off their port bow, having executed a maneuver that their physics said was impossible. The crude armor plating they'd detected earlier had transformed, its surface now rippling with patterns that hurt to look at directly. "How?" Valixis demanded. "Their drive system is simple fusion-based technology." Chief Engineer Derek Sullivan's voice came through the Wellington's command channel. "Hawking drive performing beautifully, Captain. Those quantum gravity manipulators we installed last refit are paying for themselves." "Multiple weapons locks from the alien fleet," Torres reported. "They're cycling through different targeting frequencies, trying to get a solid lock." She paused, checking another reading. "And they've just noticed that their scans aren't bouncing off our hull anymore." Miller leaned forward in her command chair. "Time to show them why humanity doesn't rely on energy weapons, Commander. Load the first demonstration package." Inside the Wellington's main weapon bay, systems that had been disguised as simple missile tubes reconfigured themselves. What emerged looked deceptively simple, sleek projectiles that appeared to be nothing more than advanced missiles. They were so much more. "Launching demonstration package," Torres announced. "Targeting their sensor arrays only. No casualties." The missiles burst from the Wellington's launchers, and for a moment, the Zaxri tactical officers relaxed. Their shields were designed to handle primitive kinetic weapons. Their targeting computers calculated the missiles' trajectories and adjusted shields accordingly. Then the missiles changed. Each projectile split into dozens of smaller units, each operating independently yet in perfect coordination. They moved in ways that violated every principle of momentum the Zaxri understood, crossing paths impossibly and leaving ghost images in their wake. "What manner of weapons are these?" Valixis demanded as his tactical display tried and failed to track the incoming threats. The answer came in the form of precision strikes that somehow passed directly through their supposedly impenetrable shields. Each impact was surgical, disabling sensor arrays across his fleet without causing any structural damage or casualties. On the Wellington's bridge, Torres allowed herself a small smile. "All targets neutralized, Captain. Their primary sensor arrays are offline, and their secondary systems are getting nothing but static." "Well done, Commander." Miller opened a channel to the Zaxri fleet. "Superior Tactician Valixis, I trust we now have your complete attention. Those were our warning shots, using what we consider training weapons. Shall we discuss peaceful alternatives to this engagement, or would you like to see what our actual combat systems can do?" The silence from the Zaxri fleet was deafening. Finally, Valix's voice came through, carrying a note of something no Zaxri commander had expressed in centuries: humility. "We would be interested in discussing alternatives, Captain Miller." Lieutenant Michael Rodriguez watched his weapons console with the intensity of a master conductor preparing for a symphony's crescendo. The Wellington's true weapon systems had barely stretched their legs during the initial demonstration, and he knew what was coming next. Multiple power spikes from the alien fleet, Torres reported from Tactical. "Looks like some of their ships aren't ready to admit defeat just yet." Captain Miller nodded, having expected this response. "Mr. Rodriguez, I believe it's time for the full demonstration package. Show them what those primitive kinetic weapons can really do." "With pleasure, Captain." Rodriguez's fingers danced across his console, bringing the Wellington's main battery online. The weapon ports that had previously launched simple-looking missiles reconfigured themselves, revealing multilayered quantum accelerators and phase-shifted launching systems. On the Dominance Eternal, Valixis watched in growing horror as his secondary command vessels broke formation, charging their primary weapons in direct violation of his orders. The human ship's casual dismantling of their sensor arrays had sparked panic among his subordinates. "Hold position," he commanded, but it was too late. 3 Zaxri cruisers opened fire simultaneously, launching their most powerful plasma barrages at the Wellington. Rodriguez grinned as the incoming fire registered on his display. "Permission to demonstrate our point defense systems, Captain." "Granted. Keep it flashy but non-lethal, Lieutenant. We want to educate, not eliminate." The space around the Wellington suddenly came alive with what looked like tiny stars. Quantum-guided interceptors no larger than tennis balls emerged from hidden ports across the hull, each one powered by a miniaturized fusion core. They met the incoming plasma bolts in a spectacular display of light and energy, creating patterns in space that the Zaxri sensors couldn't even begin to process. "Not a single hit on our shields," Cooper reported from his station, almost sounding disappointed. "Want me to show them what we're actually carrying in our weapons base, Captain?" Miller's expression remained neutral, but her eyes sparkled. "Execute demonstration sequence Delta. Let's introduce them to human innovation." The Wellington's hull shifted again, quantum-structured plates realigning to reveal what the Zaxri had assumed were cargo holds. Instead, rows of advanced weapon systems emerged, technology that made their previous demonstration look primitive by comparison. "By the first egg," Valixis whispered as his sensors tried to analyze the human ship's transforming structure. "Their entire hull is a weapon system. The first salvo from the Wellington's true arsenal was precisely calculated to demonstrate overwhelming superiority while causing 0 casualties. Quantum-locked gravity beams reached out to 3 of the most aggressive Zaxri ships, temporarily nullifying their artificial gravity and drive systems. Advanced electromagnetic pulses, specifically tuned to Zaxri technology, rendered weapons systems inert without damaging life support. "All targeted vessels successfully neutralized," Rodriguez reported. "Their crews are shaken but unharmed. Hull integrity maintained across all targets." Miller opened a broadcast channel to the entire Zaxri fleet. "As you can see, superior tactician, we've been extremely gentle so far. These are, after all, merely our defensive systems. Would you like to see what the Wellington carries for actual combat scenarios?" To emphasize her point, Rodriguez activated the ship's quantum targeting array. Suddenly, every Zaxri vessel found itself locked by weapons they couldn't even detect, their most sophisticated defensive systems registering as effectively transparent. Valixis stared at his tactical display in disbelief. The human vessel had painted targeting solutions that somehow existed in multiple quantum states simultaneously, making them impossible to block or evade. Their entire combat doctrine, built on technological superiority over primitive species, had just been systematically dismantled. "Captain Miller," he transmitted, his voice carefully controlled, "I believe it would be beneficial to both our peoples if we were to discuss the terms of a more equitable relationship. A wise decision, Miller responded. Though I should mention, the Wellington is considered a mid-tier vessel in our fleet. Shall we discuss what mutual cooperation might look like between our civilizations? The silence that followed was broken only by the sound of Zaxxery crew members trying to process the implications of that statement. Grand Admiral Zelkar of the Zaxxery High Command watched the battle footage for the 12th time, each viewing only deepening his sense of existential dread. Around the circular command chamber, other members of the High Council sat in stunned silence as the recording showed the Wellington executing maneuvers that defied their understanding of physics. Impossible, whispered First Strategist Nexval, her secondary eyes twitching. The energy requirements alone for such movements. And yet we all witness it, Zelkar responded, gesturing at the holographic display with a trembling appendage. A single vessel, a single human vessel has rendered our entire combat doctrine obsolete. Meanwhile, in the Strategic Command Center beneath Mount Cheyenne, Admiral Robert Mad Dog Marshall studied the live feed from the Wellington with satisfaction. Holographic displays showed the positions of both fleets, with real-time analysis of Zaxxery communications and power signatures streaming in. Beautiful work, Jessica, he murmured, watching Captain Miller's handling of the situation. The Wellington's demonstration had achieved exactly what they'd hoped: overwhelming shock and awe without a single casualty. Colonel Sarah Matthews, head of xenopsychology, stepped forward to provide her analysis. The Zaxxery response patterns match our predictions perfectly, Admiral. Their civilization's hierarchy is built on technological superiority. The Wellington hasn't just challenged their military doctrine, it's shaking the foundations of their society. Back in the Zaxxery command chamber, a new transmission arrived from the border fleet. The council members watched as their ships attempted to analyze the human vessel's capabilities, each scan revealing new impossibilities. Their hull, Technical Overseer Vax Tur reported, his voice quavering. It appears to exist in multiple quantum states simultaneously. Our most advanced sensors can't even maintain a consistent reading on its basic structure. In the Strategic Command Center, Dr. Marcus Reynolds, chief architect of the Wellington's quantum systems, allowed himself a small smile as he reviewed the technical data. They're still trying to analyze the ship using conventional quantum mechanics. They haven't even considered the possibility of parallel phase technology. Admiral Marshall nodded. And the rest of the fleet? The Yorktown, Excalibur, and Normandy are maintaining position just outside their sensor range, his tactical officer reported, each running different configurations of the deception protocols. If the Zaxxery decide to escalate, they'll face 3 completely different sets of impossible technologies. The Zaxxery High Council's deliberations were interrupted by a priority alert. New sensor contacts had appeared at the edge of their space, more human vessels, each one presenting unique and terrifying sensor profiles. By the sacred eggs, Zelkar breathed, watching the tactical display update. How many different ways have they mastered quantum mechanics? Professor Elizabeth Chin, Earth's leading expert on xenosociology, watched the Zaxxery reactions through the Wellington's quantum surveillance systems. Noticed their communication patterns, she pointed out to Admiral Marshall. They're struggling to maintain their hierarchical protocol. The presence of multiple human ships, each demonstrating different advanced technologies, is forcing them to question their entire classification system for spacefaring races. Marshall's expression remained stern, but his eyes showed satisfaction. And that's exactly what we wanted. Break their assumptions about technological progression being linear. Show them that humanity didn't just climb the ladder. We built our own stairs. In the Zaxxery Council chamber, the mood had shifted from shock to a grim acceptance. Their civilization had encountered numerous species over the centuries, each fitting neatly into their hierarchy of technological advancement. But humanity had just demonstrated that their entire understanding of technological progress might be fundamentally flawed. We must adapt, Zelkar finally declared, his voice heavy with the weight of history. For the first time in 10,000 years, the Zaxxery hegemony must consider the possibility that we are not the pinnacle of evolution. Back on Earth, Admiral Marshall opened a secure channel to the Wellington. "Well done, Captain Miller. Phase 1 is complete. Initiate diplomatic protocols at your discretion. Let's show them that humanity's greatest technology isn't our weapons. It's our capacity for innovation." Senior researcher Kexley's appendages trembled as she compiled the data for the High Council. Her team had spent the last 30 hours analyzing every scrap of information about humanity they could gather, and each new discovery made her carapace tighten with dread. "Display historical timeline," she commanded, and the holographic display filled with a chronological record that defied belief. In the observation chamber above, the High Council watched in growing horror as humanity's technological progression unfolded before them. "This cannot be accurate," First Strategist Nexvol protested. "No species progresses from primitive combustion to quantum manipulation in such a short span." But the evidence was undeniable. The humans had gone from their first powered flight to breaking the light barrier in less than 2 centuries. Their mastery of atomic theory had led to both devastating weapons and revolutionary power sources within decades. "Most concerning is their approach to artificial intelligence," Kexley continued, bringing up new data streams. "Where we sought to create servants, they created partners. Their neural networks don't just process, they innovate. Each human vessel carries quantum AI systems that can rewrite their own code in response to new challenges." On the Wellington's bridge, Captain Miller reviewed the Zaxxery research efforts through their quantum surveillance network. Lieutenant Cooper's decryption algorithms were easily penetrating their supposedly secure databases. "They're accessing our public historical records," Cooper reported with a grin. "Want me to let them find the classified files about Project Prometheus?" Miller nodded. "Let them see just enough to understand what they're dealing with. Dr. Reynolds, are you ready with the technical analysis?" Dr. Jennifer Reynolds, the ship's chief science officer, looked up from her station. "The Zaxxery understanding of quantum mechanics is peculiar, Captain. They discovered quantum entanglement, but never explored quantum superposition. They mastered faster-than-light travel, but never considered parallel phase technology." In the Zaxxery Research Center, new information was pouring in. Kexley's team had discovered references to human military projects that challenged their comprehension. The Wellington's capabilities, terrifying as they were, represented only a fraction of human technological achievement. Their approach to warfare, military analyst Vex Tor reported, his voice strained. "It's woven into their scientific method. Every breakthrough in physics becomes a potential weapon. Every advance in mathematics leads to new battle strategies." The display showed human combat simulations, battles fought across multiple quantum states simultaneously, weapons that could rewrite local spacetime, defense systems that existed in probabilistic clouds rather than fixed positions. "But the most dangerous aspect," Kexley continued, "is their drive to improve. Look at their entertainment media from before they achieved spaceflight." The display filled with scenes from human science fiction, stories that had imagined technologies centuries before they became reality. The Zaxxery Council watched in amazement as human creativity laid out roadmaps for technological advancement long before they had the means to achieve it. "They dreamed it first," Kexley explained. "Every impossibility we're witnessing today, they imagined it generations ago. Their fiction became their science. Their fantasies became their technology." In Strategic Command, Admiral Marshall reviewed the Zaxxery research efforts with satisfaction. "They're beginning to understand," he noted to his staff. "The Wellington isn't just a demonstration of our technology. It's a demonstration of how humanity thinks." Professor Chen nodded in agreement. "Their entire civilization is built on the idea of reaching a pinnacle. They can't comprehend a species that sees every achievement as just another stepping stone." Back in the Zaxxery Command Center, Kexley displayed her final analysis. "The vessel we encountered, the Wellington, appears to be testing grounds for technologies they developed decades ago. Their current research," she paused, her primary eyes closing briefly. Their current research involves concepts our scientists consider theoretically impossible. Grand Admiral Zelkar absorbed this information in silence. Finally, he spoke. We thought we were studying them. But from the moment they appeared in our space, they were the ones conducting the true analysis. The question is not whether we can match their technology. It's whether we can adapt to their way of thinking. Colonel Emily Winters stood on the bridge of the U.S. Yorktown as it emerged from quantum space alongside its sister ships. Where the Wellington had demonstrated restraint and precision, her battle group was about to showcase humanity's mastery of space warfare in all its terrifying glory. Battle group in formation, her tactical officer reported. Excalibur and Normandy are synchronized and ready for the demonstration sequence. Very well. Winters allowed herself a small smile. Let's show them something new. Initialize the quantum mesh network. The space between the three human vessels came alive with invisible connections, their quantum AI systems linking in ways the Zaxri sensors couldn't even detect. Each ship began transmitting on different frequencies, their energy signatures forming patterns that seemed to defy the laws of physics. On the Dominance Eternal, Valixis watched in growing dismay as his sensor officers tried to make sense of the new arrivals. Report. What are we seeing? Unknown, superior tactician. His chief sensor operator responded, mandibles clicking in distress. Each vessel appears to be utilizing different fundamental laws of physics. The readings, they contradict each other. The Yorktown's hull gleamed with a metallic sheen that absorbed all scanning attempts. The Excalibur appeared to exist in multiple locations simultaneously, its quantum state undefined until directly observed. The Normandy's drive signature suggested it was somehow moving through dimensions beyond normal spacetime. Captain Miller watched from the Wellington with professional appreciation. Colonel Winters certainly knows how to make an entrance, she commented. Lieutenant Cooper, are you recording their reactions? Every bit of data, Captain, Cooper replied. Their sensor networks are practically having a nervous breakdown trying to analyze our battle group's capabilities. Colonel Winters opened a channel to the Zaxri fleet. This is Colonel Emily Winters of the United Nations Space Force. We'll be conducting a series of combat evolution demonstrations. For your safety, please maintain your current positions. Before the Zaxri could respond, the human battle group began to move. Their formation shifted in ways that seemed choreographed by a master dancer, each ship's movements complementing the others perfectly. When one vessel appeared vulnerable, another would be perfectly positioned to cover it. Except the apparent vulnerability was always a deception. Look at their command structure, Grand Admiral Zelkar observed from the High Command Center, watching the feed. Each ship operates independently yet in perfect coordination. There's no rigid hierarchy, no central control point to target. The demonstration reached its peak as the human vessels executed what they called a quantum pincer movement. The Yorktown split into what appeared to be multiple temporal echoes, each one as solid and real as the original. The Excalibur's weapons platforms reconfigured themselves into configurations that the Zaxri had never imagined possible. The Normandy seemed to fold space around itself, appearing simultaneously at multiple tactical advantage points. They're not just showing us their technology, First Strategist Nexbold realized. They're showing us how they think. Each ship approaches the same tactical situation differently, yet they work together flawlessly. In Strategic Command, Admiral Marshall watched the demonstration with satisfaction. Colonel Winters always did have a flair for the dramatic, he noted. Dr. Reynolds, how are they processing this? Dr. Marcus Reynolds studied the incoming data. Their entire tactical doctrine is breaking down. They're realizing that every assumption they had about space warfare was based on a limited understanding of physics itself. The demonstration concluded with a synchronized maneuver that the Zaxri computers simply refused to process. All three human vessels briefly occupied the same space-time coordinates without interference, their quantum fields harmonizing in ways that shouldn't have been possible. Message from the Wellington Colonel, the Yorktown's comm officer reported. Captain Miller says the Zaxri are ready for the next phase. Winters nodded. Very well. Signal the battle group to stand by for the diplomatic initiative. She paused, studying the alien fleet's formation, and inform our guests that this demonstration represented approximately 20% of our vessel's actual combat capabilities. The silence from the Zaxri fleet spoke volumes about their comprehension of that statement. The conference room aboard the Wellington hummed with an energy that had nothing to do with its quantum field generators. Captain Jessica Miller sat at one end of the sleek obsidian table, while Superior Tactician Valixes and Grand Admiral Zelkar occupied the other, their four-eye gazes still processing the technological marvels surrounding them. Your ship's internal architecture, Zelkar began, mandibles clicking in barely contained amazement. It appears to be significantly larger inside than its external dimensions would suggest. Miller smiled. A practical application of quantum spatial folding. One of our simpler innovations, actually. We find it helps maximize efficiency in ship design. The holograms floating above the table displayed scenes from the recent demonstrations, showing the human battle group's synchronized maneuvers from multiple angles. Colonel Winters had joined them via quantum entanglement projection, her image perfectly solid, despite existing simultaneously in 3 different ships. What we've shown you today, Miller continued, represents only a fraction of humanity's capabilities. But more importantly, it represents our approach to the universe itself. Your approach, Valixes said carefully, seems to be rewriting the laws of physics as we understand them. Not rewriting. Dr. Jennifer Reynolds corrected, joining the conversation from her science station. Expanding. Where your civilization saw limits, we saw possibilities. When we encountered barriers, we looked for ways around, through, or between them. The Zaxri leaders exchanged glances. Their civilization had spent millennia building upon established principles, perfecting what they knew. Humanity, in contrast, seemed to treat the impossible as merely a challenge not yet overcome. Which brings us to why we're here, Miller said, gesturing to a new hologram that appeared above the table. It showed the known galaxy, with both human and Zaxri territories highlighted. We're not interested in conquest or subjugation. What we're proposing is a partnership. Partnership. Zelkar's secondary eyes widened, after demonstrating such overwhelming superiority. Colonel Winters smiled. That demonstration wasn't about superiority, Admiral. It was about potential. Everything you've seen, the quantum manipulation, the spatial folding, the parallel phase technology. We developed these because we never stopped questioning, never stopped imagining what might be possible. And now, Miller continued, we're offering to share that perspective with you, not by giving you our technology, but by helping you develop your own understanding of what's possible. The hologram shifted, showing theoretical models of hybrid human-Zaxri technology. Where human ships bent physics in elegant but aggressive ways, Zaxri designs showed a precision and stability that even humanity's best engineers admired. Your civilization has achieved remarkable things, Dr. Reynolds noted. Your approach to plasma containment, for instance, is more elegant than ours. There's much we could learn from each other. Valixes leaned forward, his tactical mind already processing the possibilities. You're suggesting a cultural exchange. Technical cooperation. We're suggesting evolution, Miller replied. Your civilization values hierarchy and order. Ours thrives on innovation and adaptation. Together, we could achieve things neither of us could manage alone. The hologram expanded, showing potential futures. Joint research stations, combined fleet exercises, shared scientific discoveries. The Wellington's quantum computers had projected dozens of possible development paths, each more promising than the last. The choice is yours, Colonel Winters added. You've seen what humanity can do when challenged. Now imagine what our species could accomplish as allies. Grand Admiral Zelkar was silent for a long moment, his ancient eyes studying the humans before him. In all our history, he finally said, we have never encountered a species that made us question our fundamental understanding of the universe, until now. He rose, assuming the formal posture of Zaxxery diplomatic protocol. "The hegemony accepts your proposal, Captain Miller. Let this day mark not the beginning of conflict between our peoples, but the dawn of a new understanding." Miller stood as well, extending her hand in the human gesture of agreement. "To new possibilities, Admiral." As they shook hands, human and alien together, the Wellington's quantum core hummed with energy, its advanced systems already calculating the countless potential futures this moment had just created. The first joint human Zaxxery research project would begin the very next day, with the Wellington's crew teaching their new allies the most important human lesson of all. The only true limit is the one you accept without questioning.